Hey everybody, PKFT1 here, and I wanted to do a bit of a look back on the year. I think 2020 was a time for many where people had a lot of time to sit down and play games due to circumstances. And while I wasn't able to get to nearly as many games as I would have liked to, I was able to finally get into a bit of my backlog this year. I wanted to talk briefly about my experience with the games I played or even finished this year. These are mostly games that came out before 2020, but there are a few in here that came out this year, so let's get started. Fire Emblem Three Houses. I started this game around Christmas of last year, and it filled most of my time in January. As my first entry into the Fire Emblem series, it was an easy entry point due to the constant comparisons it was having to Persona at the time. The game really gave me an appreciation for strategy RPGs, and it was pretty addictive at the time. I only played through the Golden Deer route, but it was enticing just to see it through. Seeing characters from all the different houses start to interact with one another and build bonds was probably one of my favorite parts of the game. And while running through the corridors and halls of Garreg Monastery was relaxing, it did feel more like a chore than anything after a while, especially with having to teach and everything. I would have liked to have had a few more mini games while I like to do fishing and sometimes planting stuff. It would have been nice to have a little more available to you in the monastery. Overall, though, this was a game that I really fell in love with, especially because of the characters. And of course, the halfway point is really where crap starts to hit the fan, and the game really starts to deliver on everything it's building up towards. So a lot of those things that you know that they're hinting at really start to happen. So it was absolutely one of the most captivating experiences that I had this year, and I recommend anybody who may be interested in it to check it out. Devil May Cry 5. So, I know this is a bit blasphemous in the DMC community, but this is really the only DMC game that I've beaten. And while I've played other games in the series, I never was able to bring myself to finish them. I know it's terrible, but for whatever reason, DMC 5 really stood out to me. The combat has always been a blast, but in DMC 5, it really brings it to a new level. I've never had such consistent fun in a character action game before. Every character just felt fun to switch between, whether you're Nero or V or, of course, Dante. And the new moves and weapons keep the game consistently fresh right up until the end. Not to mention, there are a lot of beautiful set pieces and the crazy enemies and bosses that you fight along the way. It really does help the game to feel like it's always innovating on itself. And the story was just enough to keep me on the edge of my seat. I've heard various things about people's opinions on the story, but to me it was pretty exciting and it really helped me get through to the end. And before the game came out, when there still wasn't much known about the character of V, we hadn't seen his face in any of the trailers, and there were all these weird things like music videos that had secret messages about him. All we really knew about him was that he had like these tattoos, and we had only seen the back of him, and I thought that they were for like a month, building up to him secretly being Demi-Fiend from SMT3. And so I had this running theory for a long time, and then it just turned out that it was Adam Driver. DMC5 is a game that anybody who's interested in any sort of character action game should check out. Or if you just like anything crazy or fun, it's definitely one to check out. Probably one of the few games on this list that I consistently think about going back to. And I've really got to get to the rest of the series. Spider-Man PS4. I feel like I'm the only person in the world that didn't play this game when it came out. So I'm pretty late to the punch on this, but Spider-Man PS4 might be my favorite interpretation of Peter Parker. At least before they did the whole Tom Holland face transplant thing. But one of the best parts is the city exploration. It's really enjoyable, and you can just swing around for hours looking for backpacks or radio towers while taking care of a few bad guys along the way. And I love the relationships that Peter builds with various characters, and that the game really focuses just as much on Peter as it does Spider-Man. One of my favorite characters is Doc Ock, how he's portrayed. I really think his performance is outstanding and sympathetic. And I think MJ really holds her own in this story as well. It strikes a really great balance between fast-paced action and a lot of these slower moments with characters. And sometimes it was a little bit of a drag going into some of the slower Miles or MJ missions, but they were much more enjoyable as you began to get new abilities. I think Insomniac was the perfect choice for this type of game, and I'll definitely check out Miles Morales when I have the money and time to. Persona 5 Royal. So I don't know what there is to say that I haven't already said in my review, so I won't spend much time talking about it, but needless to say, I really loved it, and I think it improved a lot of the systems in Persona 5, such as the Baton Pass. Social links, of course, were updated, and new characters were added to the game, and those characters are fantastic additions. Of course, you know, the bread and butter of this whole thing is the third semester. And if you've been holding out on Persona 5 Royal, now is absolutely the time to catch up and figure out what you've missed before Persona 5 Strikers comes out, now that that's been confirmed for a Western release. And it is a long game, so take your time before you run out of time. Check out my review and parody of Persona 5 Royal if you want to hear more of my personal thoughts about the game, and there will be a link to that, of course, in the description, or if you wait till the end. Final Fantasy VII Remake. This game consistently blew me away. It's a beautiful and pretty fun retelling of the events of FF7, and it does so in a way that makes Midgar feel real and lived in. It strikes a balance between kind of this open world and a linear path that balances exploration with story. The hybrid combat of the real-time action and turn-based strategy is actually one of my favorite parts of it, the game. And if you think that you can win just by button mashing with your Buster Sword, you're going to be in for a bit of a bad time. I'm not that good at the game myself. In fact, I'm probably worse than most of you guys are. But there were plenty of battles where I would lose, and I'd really have to reevaluate why I lost. And oftentimes it came down to me equipping some sort of materia that I would need. And sometimes it would turn battles that were really frustrating into cakewalks if I simply equipped the proper materia. And this could be frustrating sometimes, but overall, I liked having to think of those things. But there were times where you wouldn't really know until you got into the battle, and then you'd have to go through the entire battle and switch back. But regardless, I really did enjoy the combat system. And switching between Barret, Tifa, Aerith, and Cloud is probably one of the most fun parts of the game. You're able to really play as these individual party members with their own particular moves. And it's really satisfying to, you know, get in like 4 special moves or whatever, you switch between them, or, you know, do something in the nick of time as a certain character. And I'm really excited to see how this will continue to balance out and evolve when Part 2 eventually comes out. And I feel like I've heard every opinion there is on the story and how it's changed from the original Final Fantasy VII. But I'm willing to see it through before I comment on too much of it in future games. I really do think that this game stands out as one of the best Final Fantasy games in years. So whether or not you agree that the story is honored, you have to give credit to the characters and performances of the English cast. We all know how Final Fantasy performances generally go, but they really took it to the next level. I think the personalities, the back and forth jabs between Cloud and Barret, and just their general banter really adds this level of believability to the characters, and I think it elevates the game to a certain extent. And the world of Midgar is really fun to explore and just to look at. However, there are times when you'll look at like skyboxes and textures that are really flat and apparent that it would kind of impede, at least it impeded my senses to the point where it took me out of the moment. So I really hope that maybe this could be improved with some next-gen updates for FF7. But overall, I think it's one of the best, if not my favorite game of the actual year of 2020. Mario 3D All-Stars. So nothing on this list probably got more flack than the Mario 3D All-Stars collection that came out this year. The rumors surrounding this game before it came out were all over the place. I remember people claiming that it was going to be like full-on remakes to straight ports with no improvements, and what we got was closer to the latter. But all I cared about was that the games were playable on Switch, and at least Galaxy and Sunshine were now in HD widescreen. Most of my time in fall was just going through these games again, and in many ways, at least with Sunshine and Galaxy, it felt like I was playing the game for the first time. It brought a new level of appreciation for a lot of these classic titles. Even with DMC on the list, nothing will ever quite, to me, be as satisfying as like a really well-executed triple jump in Mario 64, but I'm willing to concede on Sunshine and Galaxy. While there's no real notable changes from the originals, it really reminded me as to why Mario has been so consistently loved throughout the years. This was a day one pickup for me simply for the luxury of being able to play it on Switch, and I'm not recommending anyone buy this at $60 unless they personally feel it's worth it. However, it may be your only chance, so if you're gonna jump on it, you may as well do it now. And Mario 64, of all the games, is my favorite in the collection. It's also my favorite N64 game, big surprise there. And it never really gets old for me, no matter how many times I go back to it. Sunshine and Galaxy, of course, are a bonus and look fantastic in widescreen 1080p. Definitely for me, it was one of the most enjoyable releases of the year, just to be able to go back to those. So now I'm actually going to go into a portion of honorable mentions. And the way I'm doing this is essentially these are games that I have started, I have not finished, or games that I have not gone through the majority of, but I really wanted to talk about them just to give some brief thoughts. SMT4. So earlier this year, I really made the mistake of wanting to try and learn as to why so many people love Shin Megami Tensei. And it seemed like the right move to make, seeing as everything Persona is built on is really because of the groundwork laid out by SMT. But let me just say I suck at this game, and I probably spent about 5 hours just in the tutorial area. And I just wanted to collect all the demons and items as I possibly could because I was just dying at every turn and having to go to death and revive me and paying all this money that I didn't have and I was in debt. And so it's just a big pain in the butt for me to get started. And like I said, I was having to save after every fight and I just wanted to grind before I moved on from that area. And I'm not sure if this is a rite of passage for anybody who goes to get into SMT, but just in the tutorial area, I really got my butt thoroughly kicked and finally got my first mission to go and save Navarre, and I still haven't gotten up the nerve to go on that quest just because of how brutal it was to me, and I'm not even at any of the hard parts. And I'm just at the very beginning, so I'm scared to see how badly I will get destroyed in that game. However, I would like to get back to it. I do still plan on doing it. I got pretty distracted, but I will return. Especially if any of you who follows me would like my opinion more deeply on SMT. If you're curious about a newcomer's opinion on it and maybe how I learned to get through it and adapt. So if you want to get into it too, maybe I can try to help you with that. Anyhow, I want to try to have at least one SMT game under my belt before 5 comes out. Trauma Center Under the Knife. So this game came out when I was like in 6th grade, I think, and my buddy got it for his DS. And at the time, I remember thinking how realistic the surgery looked and how my stomach couldn't handle it. And I remember he was obsessed with it. He would take it everywhere with him. And I remember going to his cousin's house, kind of watching over his shoulder as he played it. And I couldn't wrap my head around why anybody would be interested in it. However, I always did like the atmosphere of the game as well as like the music. And a few weeks ago, I finally decided, I don't know why, that I was going to try it out myself and jump into Trauma Center. And surprisingly, the game feels just as intense as it did when I remember seeing it as a kid. The operations really feel intense and make you focus on what you're doing because it can be so unpredictable. There's always something else to the operation you're performing. There's always something more that you're not expecting. And the game is surprisingly addicting, and the story itself has this visual novel-esque kind of way that it works. And it is a fun break from the operations. And sometimes it can be really easy to misread something that they tell you before an operation, and you can have issues with your operation. And you wonder why maybe something isn't working if you didn't read it right. Other times well, I should say, for me, it's this zoom function that they have in the game where you have to draw a circle to be able to zoom into a certain part of the organ or muscle or whatever it is you're operating on. And if you're not doing it right, it won't zoom in. But if it can't zoom in, then you can't operate. And so it really makes the timer run for too long, or the patient is dying and you have to do something really quick and you have to zoom out and zoom in and zoom out and zoom in. But if it doesn't read the stupid circle that you're drawing, you can never get in. And it's really bad at reading your movements with the stylus when it comes to drawing a circle. And so I have had various operations that were failed just because it wouldn't let me zoom in. I think the most I counted was 30 in a row before it zoomed in. Of course, I failed that operation. I don't know why I didn't give up after 5. But anyhow, if you're looking for something that's engaging and really easy to just pick up and jump into, I think this might be a fun one for you just to check out. It is an Atlas game, and if nothing else, Shoji Meguro, I believe, is involved with the soundtrack. Hashino, I think, helped with the game. He might be a producer on it or something. But if nothing else, there's that for you Atlas fans. Yakuza Like a Dragon. So finally, I want to talk about one of my favorite series of all time, and that's Yakuza. More specifically, I wanted to talk about Yakuza Like a Dragon. Now, I don't want to get too deep into this, because I really think that this game deserves its own video, or maybe even various videos. And I really think that anybody who loves the Persona series should absolutely give the Yakuza series a chance. Again, another video that I want to do too. I'm only about 11 hours in, but I'm really impressed so far. I had heard so many mixed things about the new turn-based combat, and again, I'm not very far in, but so far I really love it. And it was really easy to just button mash your way through gang members in previous titles with the whole beat 'em up aspect. But they really take it and double down on the RPG elements in this game. And you really have to watch where you go around the city too. It keeps you on edge when you're traveling. You may run into a gang of like guys who are 10 levels above your own, and you'll get mugged if you're not careful. So it adds a lot more depth to how you explore the city, which I really appreciate because it made it feel different. And things like gear especially feel so much more valuable, and weapons too. And I never stopped to think about those things in the previous titles because they weren't really as important. And now it's like, you know, you really have to focus on those things. And also at the beginning of the game, they make it really hard for you to earn some money, which I like because you really have to work your way and earn your way through this game. Now, that might change. I'm only, I think, in the 4th chapter so far. But to me, this new entry has really made Yakuza feel fresh again. So, I was nervous about Ichiban as the new protagonist. If any of you have played, you know that Kiryu has been the protagonist more or less for the past 6-7 games. If you're not counting Ishin and, what is it, Kenzai? I can't remember. The other one. And he is very much, well, in terms of Ichiban, he's very much his own character. And I'm very excited to see where the story goes with this game. They really set it up. And I think that anybody who's, you know, a little bit nervous about this game, I think you should give it a chance. I think it's the best game I've played since 0 in the series. With that said, that's my year in review, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed it, and let me know if there's a game that you think I should check out and play. I really like recommendations of series and games based on things that I've played, because a lot of times people know better than me as to what I would like. There's much more I'd like to get to in the future that I haven't even touched yet, or even think about. I know that one of those is the 13 Sentinels. I really want to get to that at some point. But if there's anything that you've played this year that you'd really like to talk about, leave it below, kind of in the comments, and I'll be looking through that. And again, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.